The summons came while I was holding forceps halfway through a molar extraction. Dr. Monica Rivera. It's for you, Alyssa whispered. I glanced down latex gloves, trembling as I read the words. My sister was suing me for $3,000 a month because my success as a dentist made her feel worthless. Dr. Rivera, this just came for you. It looks official. I took the envelope with my gloved hand, sliding it into the pocket of my scrubs as I finished the extraction. My mind raced through every overdue bill, every licensing renewal, every malpractice insurance payment I might have missed. The patient left holding a gauze pad against her cheek, thanking me for being gentle. I shut the operatory door behind her before tearing open the envelope with trembling fingers. The words blurred as I scanned the first lines, but then they sharpened, slashing straight through the thin calm I'd forced on myself all morning. It was from Sophie. My sister Sophie Rivera, 32 years old, who had never held down a job for longer than 6 months, was suing me for $3,000 a month. The document stated it clearly in cold black letters. I was responsible for intentional emotional distress and loss of life opportunities because my success as a dentist had caused her irreparable psychological harm. I let out a short, humorless laugh. My heart pounded, my hands still stained with the faint scent of latex. I read the line again, thinking it would transform into something else if I stared long enough. I stepped out of the operatory, feeling the eyes of my staff on me. I forced a smile. Everything's fine, I lied, pushing the door to my private office closed behind me. My phone was already ringing as I sank into the chair, the summons still in my lap. I didn't check the screen before answering. Monica. Ethan's voice was warm, steady, but carried a note of worry he tried to hide. Everything okay at the office? I swallowed. You're not going to believe this, Ethan. What happened? Sophie is suing me. There was silence on the line, so heavy that I could almost hear the weight drop. For what? She wants $3,000 a month. Because I paused, pressing a hand against my forehead, because my success as a dentist makes her feel bad about herself. You're kidding. I wish I was. I glanced at the papers, reading the phrases again, each one more absurd than the last. She says I intentionally became successful to humiliate her. That I owe her because I make her feel worthless. A long exhale from Ethan. That's insane. I pushed away from the desk, pacing the small space. She's serious, Ethan. She filed a complaint. She's actually doing this. What do you want to do? I stared at the framed photo of our wedding on my desk, the smiling faces, the flowers. My mind flashed to Sophie at 20, running off with a guitar player to Arizona, dropping out of community college because school was a scam. Meanwhile, I worked 3 jobs just to afford my textbooks, taking night shifts at the diner, cleaning offices before dawn, studying in the cramped break room between shifts. All so I could build the life I had now. And now she wanted a piece of it. No, she wanted me to pay for her failures. I don't know yet, I whispered. Whatever you need, I'm here. I closed my eyes, taking in the steady comfort in his voice. Thanks, I need to process this. We hung up and I looked back at the summons. My stomach tightened as I imagined Sophie's smirk, the way she would tilt her head and say it was all my fault she couldn't get her life together, that I owed her for every bad decision she had made. The phone buzzed again in my hand. This time it was my mother's number flashing across the screen. I stared at her name on the screen, letting it buzz twice more before I answered. Hi, Mom. Her voice was tight, as if she'd been holding her breath. Monica, I heard from Sophie. Of course she had. Sophie always called her first, always painted herself as the victim before the truth could catch up. I sank back into my chair, closing my eyes for a moment. She's suing me, Mom. I know. There was a rustle on the line, as if she was pacing her kitchen. She's upset, Monica. She's been crying for days. Mom, she's suing me for $3,000 a month because I make her feel bad about herself. Sweetheart, you know how sensitive she is. I let out a breath, trying not to snap. She's 32, Mom. She's struggling, so did I. My voice rose, breaking the calm I had tried to keep all morning. I worked nights at a diner, I cleaned offices, I took out loans to finish dental school while she followed some guy with a band to California. Monica, please, she pleaded softly, don't say it like that. How should I say it, Mom? She's trying to blame me for every bad choice she's made. She feels like you've left her behind. I almost laughed. I didn't leave her behind, Mom. She never wanted to catch up. There was a pause, the hum of the refrigerator in the background filling the silence. She's your sister. I know, I whispered, pressing a hand to my forehead. But this is insane. She says you've never helped her, Monica. My eyes flew open, anger shooting through me. Never helped her. Who paid her car insurance for 2 years when she lost her job? Who covered her rent when she couldn't pay her landlord? Who lent her money for emergencies she never paid back, Monica? Who paid for the dental work she needed? Mom. My voice was shaking now. Who bailed her out of her mistakes over and over? There was silence. Then her voice smaller than before. She's still your sister. And I'm still her sister, I shot back. But I can't be her wallet too. Please, Monica, she said, her voice almost breaking. Can't you just give her something to keep the peace? My throat tightened, my chest burning. How much will be enough, Mom? 3,000 a month, 510. Will she stop then? Will she finally be happy? Don't talk like that. I closed my eyes, the weight of the conversation pressing against my ribs. I could almost see Sophie's face, the smug tilt of her chin, the way she would smile at Mom and say I owed her, that I was selfish if I didn't help. I have patience waiting, I said quietly. Monica, don't be cruel. I'm not being cruel. I looked down at the summons in my hand. I'm trying to live my life. She was crying now, I could hear it in the shallow breaths on the other end. She's struggling. I swallowed. We're all struggling, Mom. There was nothing left to say. I ended the call before I could hear her cry harder, pressing the phone to my chest as I leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. Outside, I could hear Alyssa's voice checking in the next patient, pretending everything was normal. I forced myself up, shoving the papers into a drawer, plastering a smile on my face as I stepped back into the hallway. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. A message from Sophie. You'll regret this. I stared at it, my jaw tightening. For a moment, I felt the old guilt rise up in my throat, the urge to fix everything for her, to keep the family calm, to keep Mom from crying. But something inside me snapped, something quiet and small but strong. I slid the phone back into my pocket, adjusted my white coat, and opened the operatory door. Sophie wanted a war she thought I would never fight. She was about to find out how wrong she was. That night, Sophie went live on Facebook. She sat on her couch, hair tied back, eyes red, holding a tissue close to her mouth like a trembling child. Her voice cracked as she spoke. I never wanted to do this. She began, wiping a tear, but my sister Monica Rivera left me with no choice. My phone screen lit up with the notification. Alyssa had messaged me, you should see what Sophie's saying about you. But I was already watching. She's out there in Dallas, Sophie continued, her voice rising, driving her new Lexus, living in a big house, pretending she's some hero while I can't even pay my rent. She started to cry harder, letting the tears fall, pulling in sharp breaths for the camera. She shook her head, staring directly into the screen. She never cared about me. She never helped me. She just wants to watch me suffer so she can feel better about herself. Comments started flooding in under her video. That's disgusting. What kind of sister does that? Wow, money changes people. Drop her name, girl. Let's expose her. And she did. She tagged me. My name, my business, my life, all exposed to hundreds of strangers who only saw her tears, who only heard her shaking voice. I felt a heaviness settle in my stomach as I scrolled through the comments. People I didn't know called me a monster, a heartless sister, a greedy woman who stepped on her family to get ahead. Then Sophie posted a picture of me outside the office holding a coffee, keys to my car in hand. She captioned it, money doesn't buy love, but she doesn't care. My phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. I turned it off and tossed it onto the couch, pacing my living room with my arms crossed tightly over my chest. It didn't stop there. Sophie posted the same sob story in a Facebook group called Women Rising Texas, claiming she was a victim of emotional abuse by a wealthy, controlling family member. She said she needed help to fight back, to find justice, to escape the toxicity. People flooded her post with sympathy and offers of help. Some even shared it publicly, spreading her lies further. The anger in their comments burned through the screen, and it was all aimed at me. The next morning at the office, Alyssa met me at the door, worry etched into her face. Dr. Rivera, we've had 3 cancellations already. They said they read some things online. I forced a nod, gripping my bag tighter, pushing down the nausea rising in my throat. Thanks for letting me know, Alyssa, we'll be fine. But it kept happening. By noon, 5 more patients had canceled. One left a voicemail saying she couldn't trust someone who treated family that way. I closed my office door, sinking into my chair, letting the silence of the room press against me. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was Mom again. I hesitated before answering, but I couldn't avoid her forever. Monica, she said, her voice hoarse from crying. Please just talk to her. This is getting out of hand. Mom, she's lying about me. She's turning people against me. She's hurting. Mom pleaded. She feels abandoned. She's hurting because she refuses to take responsibility. I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. I closed my eyes, taking a breath. I can't give her what she wants. Mom started to cry again, quietly this time. Can't you just help her a little so she'll stop? I felt something in me break, the old guilt and duty twisting in my chest. I thought of the empty appointment slots on the schedule, the hateful comments online, the shaking in my hands as I held my phone last night. I can't, Mom. There was nothing but her soft sobbing on the line. I have to go, I said quietly, ending the call before I could hear her beg again. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, taking deep breaths. I tried to remind myself why I worked so hard, why I built this life, why I couldn't let Sophie tear it down piece by piece. But as I opened my laptop to check the office email, a subject line made my breath catch. Local news: Dallas dentist sued by sister for emotional damages. I clicked the email and the headline opened, bold and unforgiving. Dallas dentist sued by sister for emotional damages. There was a photo of me in my white coat, smiling with a patient cropped from the office's website. Next to it was Sophie's profile picture from her livestream, tears streaking down her cheeks, eyes swollen, mouth twisted into a sob. The article quoted her directly. I just want my sister to acknowledge the pain she's caused me, she had said. I can't live in her shadow anymore. I scrolled, my fingers numb. They printed parts of her Facebook post calling me cold, greedy, heartless. The journalist described my luxury lifestyle in a quiet Dallas suburb and contrasted it with Sophie's struggles to afford basic living expenses. My head fell into my hands as I tried to steady my breathing. I could almost feel the weight of strangers' judgment pressing into my skin. A knock on the door pulled me back. Alyssa peeked in, her eyes cautious. Dr. Rivera, we've had 2 more cancellations. One patient said she didn't feel comfortable coming anymore. I nodded, swallowing the bitter taste rising in my throat. Thank you for telling me. She hesitated before closing the door, and I could see the worry in her eyes. She didn't need to say it. The entire staff had seen the post, the live stream, the comments. My phone rang again, buzzing against the desk. It was Mom. Again. I almost let it ring, but something in me needed to hear what she would say now. Monica. She started, her voice thick with tears. Why is this on the news? Because Sophie put it there, Mom. She's embarrassed, Monica. She feels humiliated. She did this to herself, I said, sharper than I meant to. I took a breath, lowering my voice. She made this public. She's attacking me, my work, everything I've built. Mom sniffed, and I could hear her trying to calm herself. People are calling me, asking why you won't help her. I leaned back, looking at the ceiling, feeling the frustration burn in my chest. What do they want me to do, Mom? Pay her off to make her stop? If that's what it takes, she whispered. I closed my eyes, pressing my thumb against the space between my eyebrows. You can't be serious. She's your sister. She's ruining my life, Mom. She's hurting, she repeated. I opened my eyes, staring at the news articles still glowing on my laptop. So am I. There was silence long enough that I wondered if she had hung up. Your father says you shouldn't give in, she finally said, her voice trembling. He says you've done enough for her. He's right. I just want my girls to be okay, she said, breaking into a quiet sob. I ended the call before I could hear her cry more, dropping the phone onto the desk with a soft thud. I stood, moving to the window, looking out at the parking lot where my Lexus sat in the sun, the same car Sophie had mocked online. My reflection in the glass showed tired eyes, hair pulled back in a loose bun, lines on my forehead I hadn't noticed before. I was tired. Tired of paying for her mistakes, tired of being the villain in a story she wrote for sympathy, tired of being the one who had to fix everything. My laptop chimed again, and I turned, seeing another notification pop up. A friend from dental school had sent me the link to Sophie's latest post, where she had shared the article with a new caption. "All I ever wanted was love from my sister." Underneath, comments poured in. "She's a monster. Money doesn't buy compassion. Expose her. She deserves it." I closed the laptop, the room suddenly too small, the air too heavy. My phone buzzed again, lighting up with a new notification from Sophie's page. "Live now, the truth about my sister." I stared at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears as I felt the last bit of calm drain out of me. My phone rang the next morning while I was reviewing patient charts. I glanced at the screen. Bill Chang. My stomach tightened as I answered. "Hi Bill, good morning." His voice was clipped, formal. "Morning, Monica. I wanted to let you know I'm pulling out of the veneers package." I blinked, gripping the phone tighter. "Is there a problem with the plan? We already did your impressions." "I received some concerning messages," he said, pausing as if weighing his words. "About your family. About how you treat people." My throat went dry. "Bill, whatever you saw, it isn't true." "There were screenshots, Monica," he said. "I've always liked you, but I can't be involved in a business that mistreats family." "Bill, please, I'm sorry. I'll find another practice." The line went dead. I stood in my office, phone in my hand, my mind racing. An $80,000 treatment plan gone because Sophie decided to drag me through the mud for her pity parade. I pressed my fingers against my temples, trying to stop the pounding in my head. I thought back, remembering Sophie behind the front desk 2 years ago, her smile wide as she greeted patients. She had asked to work for me after losing another job, swearing she would do better this time. I gave her a chance. I trained her, trusted her with the front desk, trusted her with my patients. And she had flirted with them, texted them, asked them for loans behind my back. She stole petty cash from the drawer, and when I confronted her, she blamed me, said I was controlling. I had to fire her. She cried in the office, calling me heartless as she packed her purse, storming out without looking back. I should have known she'd use it against me one day. Alyssa knocked on my door, poking her head in carefully. "Dr. Rivera, are you okay?" I forced a breath, nodding. "Yeah. Just a rough morning." She stepped in, lowering her voice. "I saw Sophie's latest livestream. I'm sorry." I closed my eyes for a moment before meeting her gaze. "Thank you for letting me know." "She's telling people you stole from her," Alyssa said softly, her cheeks pink with discomfort. "That you cut her out to feel superior." The words made my jaw tighten. "None of that is true." "I know," she said quickly, "but people online, they're believing her." I nodded, fighting the burn in my chest as I sat back down. "Thanks, Alyssa." When she left, I pulled up Sophie's page. Her newest post had a selfie of her and Ryan Thomas, captioned with, "Blessed to have someone who supports me in fighting for justice." Ryan Thomas, a junior attorney at a small firm downtown. I recognized him from a Christmas party. Sophie dragged him to last year, his polite smile, the way he hovered around her like she was fragile glass. And now he was helping her sue me. I rubbed a hand over my face, taking a steadying breath before pulling up a number from my contacts. Natalie Brooks, 40 years old, a family friend who had once helped a colleague navigate a messy lawsuit. She was sharp, straightforward, never one to sugarcoat reality. I dialed, waiting as it rang. Monica, Natalie's voice came through, calm and firm. "I've heard. Let's talk." I closed my office door, sinking into the chair as I held the phone. "I didn't know who else to call," I said, my voice low. Natalie's voice was steady. "Tell me everything." I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm as I explained Sophie's lawsuit, the live streams, the messages, the cancellations, and Bill Chang pulling out of his treatment plan after receiving anonymous texts. "She used to work for me," I continued, gripping the edge of my desk. "She had access to patient contact information. I think she took Bill's number when she worked the front desk." Natalie was silent for a moment before responding. "That's illegal. And reckless." "It's Sophie," I said bitterly. She thinks she can guilt people into siding with her. She's not doing this alone, Natalie said. I heard she's with Ryan Thomas. My shoulders stiffened. He's helping her sue me. Natalie gave a small, humorless laugh. A junior associate who doesn't know what he's stepping into. I rubbed a hand over my face. She's ruining me, Natalie. No, Natalie said firmly. She's trying. There's a difference. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. What can we do? We start by documenting everything, she replied. Every payment you've ever made to her, every text, every email. Any witness who can testify to her behavior. She's twisted everything, I whispered. She's emotional and impulsive, Monica, Natalie said. That's her weakness. She'll contradict herself. I nodded, looking around the office I had built from nothing, the certificates on the wall, the framed photos of smiling patients. I wouldn't let Sophie take this from me. Natalie's voice softened. I know this is your sister, but you need to see her as the plaintiff now. I know. I'll handle the paperwork, she continued, and I'll make sure we're prepared for every angle. A quiet settled between us, heavy but steadying. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me yet, Natalie replied. Just send me everything you have. I ended the call and opened my drawer, pulling out a manila folder where I had kept receipts over the years. Checks I had written for Sophie's rent, her car insurance, the dental work I did for her for free, the cash I gave her for emergencies. That were always followed by radio silence. 10 years of enabling her hidden under the belief that it was what family did. I placed the folder on the desk, staring at it, letting the memories wash over me. Sophie smiling as she left with my money, promising to pay me back. Sophie crying on the phone when she needed help. Sophie laughing when she told me I was too uptight about money. My phone buzzed again, pulling me from the memories. A text from Natalie. I'll review everything tonight. We fight back tomorrow. I let the message sink in before I turned back to the folder, flipping it open, spreading the receipts across my desk. As I organized them, I felt a small flame of resolve light inside me. Enough. I would not let her destroy everything I built. A knock came at my office door and Alyssa stepped in, holding a small stack of mail. She placed it on the desk before glancing at the papers spread out. You're going to fight her, aren't you? She asked. I met her eyes, seeing the worry, the quiet loyalty. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I am. Alyssa nodded once before slipping out of the room, closing the door behind her. I sat down again, staring at the organized piles, letting the quiet of the room wrap around me. The door opened once more and Natalie walked in, a stack of folders in her arms. She dropped them onto the desk and looked me in the eye. Sophie doesn't know who she just started a war with. Natalie sat down across from me, flipping open the top folder as if she were slicing open a wound. She's more reckless than I thought, she said, sliding a printed screenshot across the desk. It was Sophie sitting on her couch, a thin blanket around her shoulders, tears streaking down her cheeks as she stared into her phone camera. A banner across the top read, "Help me escape my abusive sister." She went live on Facebook 2 nights ago, Natalie continued, her voice calm but cold. She told everyone you're controlling, that you've cut her off financially to punish her, that you're forcing her to live in fear. I stared at Sophie's face, frozen mid-sob, the comments visible on the screenshot. She says you're the reason she's sick, Natalie added, pulling out another image. Claims she has thyroid disease and can't afford treatment. I felt a bitter laugh rise in my chest, but it caught in my throat. She's not sick. She's also telling people you stole money from her, Natalie said, flipping to another page, and that you're hiding family money that belongs to her. She's lying to strangers for money, I whispered, shaking my head. And it's working, Natalie replied. In one night she raised almost $8,000. I let the words sink in, feeling the heat flush through my face. She's spending it, isn't she? Natalie nodded, once sliding a printed Instagram story toward me. Sophie was holding up a shopping bag from a luxury boutique, her face lit up with excitement. The caption read, "Finally treating myself after so much pain." Next to her in the photo was Ryan, smiling at the camera with his arm around her waist. He thinks he's protecting her, I muttered. He thinks he's a hero, Natalie corrected, but he's enabling her fraud. I stood up, pacing behind my chair, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. She's scamming people, Natalie. She's telling them I'm abusing her, that I'm destroying her life. Natalie leaned back, studying me carefully. She's desperate for attention, Monica, and she thinks you're too ashamed to fight back. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it, my stomach twisting as I saw the message. Pay me or I tell everyone about Dr. Brown. My fingers clenched around the edge of the desk. She's blackmailing me now. Natalie's eyes darkened. Let me see. I handed her the phone. She read the message, her jaw tightening as she placed it down. She's threatening to accuse Dr. Brown of harassment, I said, my voice shaking with anger. If I don't give her money, she'll try to destroy him. She's playing with people's lives for leverage. Natalie said, her tone sharp. That's a crime. She doesn't care, I snapped. She'll say whatever she wants to get what she wants. Natalie nodded, flipping open her laptop and inserting a flash drive. She turned the screen toward me, pressing play. The video showed Sophie at a rooftop bar holding a cocktail in one hand, Ryan's arm around her shoulders. She was laughing, her hair done, makeup flawless, wearing a new jacket I'd never seen before. To freedom, Sophie said, raising her glass to the camera. And to people who actually care. They clinked glasses, Ryan leaning in to kiss her cheek as she giggled. I felt the last piece of sympathy I had for her drain out of me. She's not sick, I said quietly. She's not suffering. She's celebrating. Natalie clicked pause, the image freezing on Sophie's smiling face. We have screen recordings of her shopping, eating out, laughing with friends, all while claiming she can't afford medicine, Natalie said. We have screenshots of her calling you abusive while she's spending donation money on designer shoes. I stared at the frozen image, my jaw tight, my chest rising and falling as I forced myself to breathe. She thinks this is a game, I whispered. Natalie shut the laptop, leaning forward across the desk. It won't be for much longer. I sank into my chair, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the quiet sink in. I felt the fear, the anger, the betrayal, but under it was something stronger, something steady. Resolve. I opened my eyes, meeting Natalie's unwavering gaze. She thinks I won't fight back, I said. Natalie's lips curved into a small, cold smile as she placed the flash drive on the desk between us. She's about to learn who you really are, Monica. I picked up the flash drive, feeling its weight in my palm as if it carried every lie Sophie had ever told. Natalie leaned back, folding her arms, her eyes sharp. I'll have the video saved on a secure cloud. We're not losing this. I nodded, setting the drive carefully in my top drawer, closing it with a quiet click. She's crossed every line, I said, my voice calm but low. Threatening Dr. Brown is the last straw. Natalie's gaze didn't waver. She thinks you'll fold if she pushes hard enough. She's wrong, I replied. My phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with another message from Sophie. You think you're better than me. Pay me or Kevin loses everything. I took a slow breath, forcing the anger down, feeling it settle into something steady and cold. Natalie reached over, taking the phone from my hand to read. She's reckless, she said. And we can use that. I looked at her, my jaw tight. She's destroying people, Natalie. She's about to destroy herself. Natalie replied, opening her laptop again. She clicked on another file, turning the screen toward me. It was another video, this one from the night of Sophie's fundraiser. The camera was shaky but clear enough. Sophie was at a restaurant laughing, her arm hooked around Ryan's as they toasted. To freedom, she said, her grin wide, her eyes bright. And to getting what we deserve. Someone off camera cheered and Sophie tilted her head back, laughing carefree. I watched, letting the image burn into my mind. I thought of the women who donated, who believed they were helping someone sick and trapped. I thought of Dr. Brown, who had built a reputation on kindness and skill, who now faced a false accusation if I didn't pay. I clenched my fists. She's never going to stop. Natalie nodded once. Then we won't either. A knock at the office door made us both turn. Alyssa peeked in, her eyes uncertain. Dr. Rivera, there's something you should see. I stood, exchanging a glance with Natalie before following Alyssa down the hall. She led us to the front desk, where her computer screen showed Sophie's Facebook page open on live video. Sophie was sitting in her car, tears streaming down her face as she spoke into the camera. My sister is trying to ruin me, she sobbed. She's trying to silence me and I'm scared. Thousands of people were watching the comments flooding in. Stay strong, Sophie. She's evil. Expose her. Sophie lifted a piece of paper to the camera. It was a screenshot of a bank transfer from me dated 3 years ago when I had paid her rent after she was evicted. She waved at her voice breaking. She thinks this makes her a hero, but it was hush money, she cried. She's hiding what she did to me. Natalie let out a quiet, sharp breath. She's spinning your kindness into evidence against you. My pulse pounded as I watched Sophie's tears fall, her shoulders shaking as she forced sobs between words, pausing for dramatic effect. I'm tired of living in fear, she said. I'm tired of pretending everything is okay. Ryan's hand appeared from off-screen, squeezing her shoulder as she buried her face in her hands. The comments kept coming, pouring gasoline onto the fire she had started. She's weaponizing victimhood, Natalie muttered, shaking her head. She's digging her own grave. I didn't respond, my eyes locked on the screen as Sophie lifted her face again, tears glistening on her cheeks, her lips trembling. She took a shaky breath, leaning closer to the camera. I'm going to tell you everything about Monica Rivera, she said, her voice slow, eyes burning with false resolve. You all deserve to know who she really is. Natalie's phone buzzed and she glanced down before looking back up, her expression sharpening. We have the footage, Monica, she said, her voice quiet but firm. And it's exactly what we need. My father knocked on my door that evening, his hand resting on the frame, shoulders slumped under the weight of years I hadn't noticed until now. Can I come in? He asked softly. I stepped aside, letting him into the kitchen where the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. He glanced around before pulling out a chair, sitting down with a heaviness that made my chest tighten. I sat across from him, waiting. He rubbed his hands together, staring at the floor. I need to tell you something. My stomach sank. What is it? He looked up, his eyes tired but clear. It's about Sophie. I exhaled, leaning back, bracing myself. When you were in dental school, he began, his voice low, Sophie forged your signature on a loan. I blinked, the words sinking in like cold water down my spine. What she said, you agreed to co-sign, he continued, his voice shaking slightly. Your mother found out when the collection notices came. She paid it off, Monica. I stared at him, the edges of my vision blurring. How much? $10,000, he said quietly. Your mother didn't want you to know. She didn't want you to hate Sophie. I pressed a hand to my forehead, closing my eyes, as the memory of those years came flooding back, working double shifts, studying in the break room, living on cheap coffee and instant noodles while Sophie was out posting pictures from music, festivals, and beach trips. She lied to me, I whispered. She lied to all of us, he replied. Your mother thought she was protecting you, but she was just protecting Sophie. I dropped my hand, meeting his eyes. Why are you telling me now? His shoulders lifted and fell, a sigh escaping. Because it's gone too far. Your mother still wants you to drop this. She thinks if you give Sophie something it will stop. It never stops, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. It's never enough for her. He nodded, eyes glistening. I know. We sat in silence, the weight of unspoken truths pressing between us. I love your mother, he said after a moment, but she's been enabling Sophie since the day she was born. She always made you the responsible one. Always made you give in. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, and I wiped it away quickly. I'm tired, Dad, I whispered. I'm tired of fixing her mistakes. He reached across the table, placing his hand over mine, his skin warm and rough. You don't owe her your life, Monica. I swallowed the words, sinking deep. Mom won't understand. She might never, he said, squeezing my hand gently. But that's not your burden to carry. A noise came from the front door, and Ethan stepped in, pausing when he saw us at the table. His eyes moved from my father to me, and he set down his keys, coming over to place a hand on my shoulder. You okay? He asked. I nodded, but the tears came anyway, quiet and warm down my cheeks. Ethan pulled me into his arms, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. You don't owe her your life, Monica, he repeated, his voice steady. You've done enough. I closed my eyes, leaning into him, letting the comfort wash over the ache in my chest. My father stood squeezing my shoulder before heading toward the door. He paused, looking back at us. I'm proud of you, he said quietly. When the door closed, Ethan held me tighter, and for the first time in weeks I let myself cry. Ethan guided me to the couch, sitting down beside me as I wiped the tears from my cheeks. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice cracking. I didn't want you to see me like this. He shook his head, pulling me closer. Don't apologize. You've been holding this in too long. I leaned against him, listening to his steady breathing, letting it ground me as the weight of everything pressed into my shoulders. Do you think I'm being cruel? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No, he said firmly. I think you're finally protecting yourself. I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against his chest. Mom won't understand. She doesn't have to, he replied. You've spent your whole life trying to fix Sophie's messes. You don't owe her that. A quiet settled between us, heavy but calm. I'm scared, I admitted. What if this destroys our family? Ethan tilted my chin up gently, making me meet his eyes. Monica, your family was never yours to save. His words sank deep, settling in the space that had always been filled with guilt. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with Mom's name. I hesitated before picking it up, pressing it to my ear. Monica, she started, her voice shaking. I heard your father came to see you. He did, I replied, keeping my tone steady. She sniffled, and I could picture her sitting at the kitchen table, wringing her hands. You don't have to do this. Please just give Sophie what she wants so we can move on. I swallowed, closing my eyes. Mom, she's blackmailing people, she's lying to everyone. She's using you. She's hurting, Mom whispered, her voice breaking. I'm hurting too, I said, my voice soft but firm. She's trying to ruin my life. She's your sister, she cried. I know, I replied, my throat tight, but I can't keep paying for her choices. There was silence, filled only by her quiet sobs on the other end. She needs help, I added, but I can't be the one to fix her. She'll hate you for this. Mom said, her voice trembling. She already does, I whispered. I ended the call, setting the phone down, leaning back into the couch as Ethan wrapped his arm around me again. You did the right thing, he said quietly. I nodded, taking a deep breath, letting it out slowly as I stared at the ceiling. For the first time, I felt the guilt loosen its grip around my chest. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the aftermath of a storm. I sat there, letting it wash over me, knowing that there was no turning back. I stood, moving to the window, looking out at the dark street, the streetlights casting long shadows across the sidewalk. I thought about Sophie, about every time I had picked up the pieces for her, every time I had covered for her lies, every time I had put her needs before my own. Not anymore. Ethan walked up behind me, resting his hands on my shoulders. You're stronger than you think, Monica. I placed my hand over his, nodding slowly, letting the resolve settle deep. The next morning, the light streamed through the kitchen window as I poured myself a cup of coffee. My phone buzzed on the counter. Natalie's name flashed on the screen. I answered, bringing the mug to my lips. It's set, she said, her voice clear. The court has scheduled the hearing. Rain tapped against the windshield as I parked outside the Travis County Courthouse, the gray clouds hanging heavy over Dallas. I sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, watching the rain slide down the glass. My stomach twisted, but I forced a deep breath, letting it out slowly. Ethan reached over, squeezing my hand. You've got this. I nodded, pushing open the car door, stepping into the cold drizzle. We walked up the courthouse steps, the air damp, the world feeling muted under the storm. Inside, the hall smelled of coffee and wet coats. Natalie was waiting near the security line, her black umbrella dripping on the floor beside her. You ready? She asked. As I'll ever be, I replied. We moved through security, the beeps and trays of keys and phones feeling distant as my mind braced for what was coming. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, rows of wooden benches, the walls lined with state flags. The air felt heavy, the whispers around us echoing louder than they should. Sophie was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table with Ryan beside her. She wore a white dress, her hair curled neatly, a tissue clutched in her hand as she dabbed at her eyes. Ryan leaned in, whispering something, and she nodded, wiping away a tear before glancing back at me with red-rimmed eyes. I turned away, refusing to let her guilt me. My parents sat in the second row. My mother's eyes were swollen, clutching a handkerchief in her lap. My father sat stiffly beside her, arms crossed, his eyes fixed on Sophie with quiet disappointment. "Let's go," Natalie said, guiding me to our table. The bailiff called the room to order as Judge Janet Hughes entered, her silver hair pulled back, glasses perched on her nose, eyes sharp as she looked over the room. "Calling the case of Sophie Rivera versus Monica Rivera," the clerk announced. Judge Hughes nodded. "Proceed." Ryan stood buttoning his jacket, his voice calm but firm. "Your Honor, my client has suffered ongoing emotional distress caused by her sister Monica Rivera. We are seeking a monthly payment of $3,000 to assist my client in achieving stability and mental health." Sophie sniffled loudly, her shoulders shaking. Ryan continued, pulling out printed photos. "As you can see, the defendant lives a life of luxury, driving a Lexus, owning a home, vacationing freely, while my client struggles to pay for basic needs." He handed the photos to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. Judge Hughes glanced at them, her expression unreadable. Ryan placed a hand gently on Sophie's shoulder as she began to cry softly, clutching the tissue to her face. I felt a pang in my chest, but Natalie placed her hand over mine under the table, grounding me. Ryan turned back to the judge. "This disparity has caused my client measurable harm, impacting her ability to live, to work, to feel safe in her own life." Judge Hughes looked up, her eyes sharp. "Anything else, Mr. Thomas?" "Not at this time, Your Honor." "Defense," Judge Hughes said, turning her gaze to Natalie. Natalie stood slowly, adjusting her suit jacket, her presence calm, unshaken. "Your Honor, the plaintiff claims my client has caused her emotional distress due to her success. What she neglects to mention is that my client has supported her financially for over a decade." She opened a folder, pulling out documents. "Here are bank statements showing payments made to the plaintiff totaling $52,000 over the last 10 years. She handed them to the bailiff. Natalie clicked her remote, the screen behind the judge, lighting up with photos of Sophie on vacation, laughing with friends, shopping bags in hand, cocktails on beach balconies. "These are recent images of the plaintiff," Natalie continued, her voice even. "Taken while she was claiming she was unable to pay for basic needs." Sophie's face paled, her eyes darting to Ryan, who shifted uncomfortably. Natalie pressed another button, playing the muted clip of Sophie at the fundraiser dinner, raising her glass with a smile. The video ended, freezing on her laughing face. "And finally, Your Honor," Natalie said, pulling out a printed message, evidence that the plaintiff attempted to extort my client by threatening to accuse Dr. Kevin Brown of harassment if she did not receive money. A hush fell over the room, the only sound the rain tapping against the windows. Judge Hughes lifted the paper, reading it carefully before setting it down, her eyes moving to Sophie. Sophie shifted in her seat, clutching the crumpled tissue as she looked at Judge Hughes, her lips trembling. The judge's gaze was steady, unblinking, the kind that made the room feel smaller, the air tighter. "Miss Rivera," she began, her voice calm, "you are asking this court to order your sister to pay you $3,000 each month for emotional distress you claim is caused by her success." Sophie nodded quickly, her voice soft. "Yes, Your Honor, it's been impossible for me to live," knowing how she. Judge Hughes raised a hand, silencing her. "You've presented photographs of your sister's car, her home, her vacations as evidence of this disparity." Sophie's eyes flickered toward Ryan, who gave her a reassuring nod. "Yes, Your Honor. It's like she wants me to feel small." Judge Hughes picked up another document from the bench, glancing at the bank statements Natalie had provided. "And yet your sister has transferred you significant sums over the last 10 years. $52,000 to be precise." Sophie's jaw tensed, her eyes darting down, blinking back tears she was trying to summon. That was nothing compared to what she has." Sophie stammered, her voice cracking. "She made me feel like I was nothing." "And you felt entitled to more?" Judge Hughes asked, her tone still even. Sophie's head shot up, her lips parting. "I just wanted to be treated fairly." A quiet cough echoed from the back of the courtroom where my mother sat, her hands gripping her purse, tears on her cheeks. My father sat rigid beside her, his eyes on Sophie, disappointment and exhaustion etched into the lines of his face. I felt Ethan's hand on my back, grounding me as the storm outside pelted the windows, the low rumble of thunder rolling through the courthouse walls. Judge Hughes set the papers down, folding her hands. "Miss Rivera in the videos submitted you were seen dining out, vacationing, shopping, and celebrating with friends while claiming financial hardship. Sophie's mouth opened closing again without sound. And in this text message, Judge Hughes continued lifting a printed screenshot. You threatened to fabricate allegations against Dr. Brown if your sister did not provide you with further funds. Ryan cleared his throat standing. Your Honor, my client was under emotional duress when she... Sit down, Mr. Thomas, Judge Hughes said sharply. Ryan hesitated before sinking back into his chair, his face flushing. Sophie's breathing quickened, her eyes wide as she shook her head. I didn't mean it like that. I was scared. Scared of what, Miss Rivera? The judge pressed, leaning forward slightly. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but no words came. Judge Hughes let the silence stretch, letting everyone in the room feel it, letting Sophie feel it. My heart pounded as I watched Sophie, the sister I once shared a room with who used to braid my hair, now shaking in front of a judge, unable to spin another story. Judge Hughes's voice broke the silence, low and direct. Miss Rivera, I have only one question for you today. Sophie's lip quivered, her eyes blinking rapidly as she tried to hold back tears that were now real. Judge Hughes tilted her head slightly, her eyes never leaving Sophie's. What, she asked, pausing to let the weight of her words settle over the room. Have you done to improve your own situation? Sophie blinked, her mouth opening as if words might tumble out, but none came. She shifted in her seat, eyes darting toward Ryan, who stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the hum of the overhead lights and the soft patter of rain against the windows. Sophie let out a shaky breath, clutching the tissue so tightly it tore in her hands. I tried, she stammered, her voice, small, brittle. I tried to. But she always. Judge Hughes tilted her head, her expression patient, but unyielding. Miss Rivera, I'm asking what you have done. Not what your sister has, not what others have failed to do for you, but what you have done to improve your own situation. Sophie's eyes widened, blinking rapidly, her breath coming faster. She made me feel like nothing, she whispered, her fingers twisting the shredded tissue. The judge's gaze was unwavering. Feelings are not actions, Miss Rivera. I will ask you again. Sophie's lips moved, but no sound came out, her eyes filled with tears that spilled down her cheeks, smudging her mascara as she shook her head. I couldn't, she finally gasped. She took everything. The judge exhaled softly, her face unreadable. No, Miss Rivera, your sister's choices are not yours. Her achievements do not prevent your own. Sophie's face turned red, her shoulders trembling as a sob ripped from her throat. She slammed her palms against the table, making papers jump. You don't understand, she screamed, her voice cracking. She ruined everything. She's always had everything. Her cries echoed off the wood-paneled walls, sharp and raw, slicing through the heavy air of the courtroom. Ryan closed his eyes, letting out a sigh before quietly gathering his papers and sliding them into his briefcase. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if he didn't want to draw attention, but the sound of the zipper closing was loud in the silence. Sophie turned, wild-eyed, grabbing at his sleeve. Ryan, please. You said you'd help me, you promised. Ryan pulled his arm away, not meeting her gaze. I'm sorry, Sophie, he said quietly, stepping back. I can't help you. He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps steady, leaving Sophie's hand hanging in the air. No, don't you leave me, she shrieked, her voice ragged, but he didn't look back. Sophie's sobs filled the room as she slumped into her chair, her hands clutching her hair, rocking slightly as if trying to disappear. Judge Hughes waited, letting the sounds fade, her expression calm as she picked up her gavel. This court will not enable entitlement, she said, her voice clear, carrying across the room. Your sister's success is not your failure, Miss Rivera, and it is not the responsibility of this court to compensate you for your refusal to take responsibility for your own life. Sophie's shoulders shook, her face buried in her hands as the words sank in. Judge Hughes glanced at the documents one last time before lifting her gaze to the room. This case is dismissed with prejudice, she announced, her tone final. The plaintiff will cover all court costs and the defendant's legal fees. She brought the gavel down with a sharp crack that seemed to vibrate through the floor. A breath I didn't realize I was holding slipped out of me, leaving me lightheaded. Beside me, Natalie turned a small smile, softening her usually stern features as she squeezed my hand. "It's over," she whispered, her voice warm, steady. I glanced back, meeting my father's eyes. His lips curved into a tired but proud smile, his chin dipping in a nod that told me without words that he was proud of me. My mother sat beside him, her eyes down, tears slipping down her cheeks as she clutched her purse. She didn't look at Sophie, didn't look at me. For a moment, everything was quiet except for Sophie's muffled sobs. She lifted her head, her eyes red strands of hair, sticking to her tear-streaked cheeks. Her gaze found me sharp and desperate, her lips curling into a snarl. "You'll pay for this, Monica," she screamed, her voice echoing through the courtroom. "You'll pay for this, you'll see." She lunged forward, her hands slamming the table again, rattling the empty water cup that rolled off the edge and hit the floor with a sharp crack. "Everything you have should have been mine." Sophie's voice was raw, breaking as she shouted. "You stole it all. You stole my life." The bailiff stepped forward, his hand hovering near her arm. "Ma'am, that's enough." Sophie jerked away, tears streaking black lines down her cheeks, mascara pooling under her eyes. Her breaths came in ragged gasps as she pointed at me again, her finger trembling. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" she screamed, spit catching on her lips. "With your fancy car, your house, your husband, your stupid dental practice, Sophie." My mother's voice cracked from behind her hands, clutching her purse against her chest. "Stop it, please." Sophie turned, eyes wide, as if noticing her for the first time. "Oh, now you care," she shouted, her voice rising higher. "You always took her side. You always loved her more." My mother shook her head, tears streaming, her lips moving silently as she mouthed, "No, Sophie, no." My father stood beside her, his face pale but steady, eyes locked on Sophie with a sadness that seemed to fill the room. "This is enough," he said, his voice low, steady. "You've done enough damage." Sophie's shoulders heaved as she let out a broken sob, the fight in her body collapsing into shaking as she gripped the back of the chair, knuckles white. "Don't look at me like that," she cried at him, her voice cracking. "You think she's perfect, don't you? You think I'm trash." Judge Hughes banged her gavel once, the sound cracking through the tension. "Miss Rivera, you will control yourself, or you will be removed from this courtroom." Sophie's eyes flickered to the judge, then back to me, her chest heaving. Her lips twisted, fury mixing with fear in her expression. For a moment she looked like the child she once was, small, lost, unable to understand why the world didn't bend for her. Natalie's hand found my wrist under the table, steadying me as I watched the sister I had once shared birthday cakes with, now a stranger, screaming in a courtroom. Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper, but it was sharp, cutting through the silence. "You will pay, Monica. I will make sure you pay." She turned, shoving past the bailiff, her heels clacking angrily against the floor as she stormed toward the doors. Her sobs echoed as she pushed them open, the heavy doors banging back against the wall before closing with a dull thud. The silence that followed was deep, almost sacred, broken only by the rain tapping against the courthouse windows. I let out a breath. I hadn't realized I was holding the air trembling in my lungs as I looked over at the judge, who watched me with a measured calm before she nodded once and stood, stepping back into her chambers. Natalie exhaled beside me, a small relieved laugh under her breath. "It's done," she whispered. I turned, searching the rows behind me, locking eyes with my father. His smile was small, proud, his eyes glassy as he mouthed, "You're free." My mother sat beside him, her face in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, refusing to look up. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady, the weight of years of guilt and fear loosening from my shoulders as I felt Ethan's arm slip around me, grounding me. Sophie's last words echoed in my mind, but for the first time they didn't scare me. They were empty. She was empty. I didn't expect it to end with a single gavel strike. I thought Sophie would haunt every corner of my mind, but after that day, the noise she created felt smaller, like a storm moving far into the distance. A week later, I heard she went live again, her eyes, red hair unwashed, screaming into the camera that the system was rigged, that I had paid off the judge, that rich people always won. But this time the comments were different. I saw screenshots people sent me showing the flood of messages calling her out, demanding refunds from her fundraiser, reminding her of the lies she told. "You scammed us, Sophie. You're a fraud. We believed you and you used us." Women from the Women Rising Texas group posted receipts sharing how they had given her money for medical treatments she never needed while she was buying designer bags and cocktails in rooftop bars. A former roommate of Sophie's shared a post about how Sophie had skipped rent for 3 months before vanishing, leaving the apartment trashed. I read the comments one by one, sitting at my kitchen counter with a cup of coffee, feeling a strange emptiness as the karma I had once wanted so desperately began to collect its debt from her. The next week, her credit cards were declined, her phone was disconnected, and she was evicted from her apartment. Ryan cut off all contact, blocked her number, changed his social media. Sophie packed what she could into 2 suitcases and left Texas with a new boyfriend, heading to Arizona, telling him the same story she told everyone else, playing the victim in a script she refused to rewrite. She didn't call me. She didn't dare. I returned to my clinic on Monday, walking through the glass doors with a quiet peace I hadn't felt in years. Alyssa greeted me with a relieved smile, the waiting room full again, patients chatting softly, the air warm with the scent of coffee and clean floors. My schedule was full for weeks, patients returning, trusting me, the damage Sophie tried to inflict dissolving under the steady routine of the work I loved. That afternoon, I received a text from my father. "I'm proud of you." I stared at the words for a long time before replying. "Thank you, Dad." That evening, as I was locking up the clinic, a delivery driver arrived, handing me a small white box. It was a pie. My mother's handwriting was on the note taped to the top. No words, just a pie. I stood there, the pie warm in my hands, letting out a breath that I had been holding for years. Forgiveness is quiet, I thought. Sometimes karma isn't loud. Sometimes it arrives when the excuses run out, when the last person willing to listen finally walks away. Sophie had spent her life running from herself, blaming everyone, blaming me, blaming the world for the emptiness she refused to fill. And for the first time, it was no longer my job to fix it. The days after the trial felt quiet in a way I hadn't known in years. I woke up to the sunrise, brewed my coffee, and sat on the porch with Ethan, letting the morning air clear the last traces of fear Sophie had left behind. But Sophie couldn't let it go. She went live again, her face close to the camera, tears streaking her cheeks, screaming that the system was rigged, that I was rich enough to buy the court, that no one cared about women like her. She tried to rally sympathy, but this time people didn't clap for her. Women from the Women Rising group posted screenshots showing how Sophie had used their donations for shopping sprees, dinners, and weekend trips. They demanded accountability, calling her a liar, a thief, a manipulator. Friends she had borrowed money from messaged her publicly, reminding her of the hundreds she never paid back. Old roommates shared how she left apartments in chaos, bills unpaid, moving on to the next place, the next person to use. Her stories didn't work anymore. Ryan blocked her on everything, his profile now scrubbed of any trace of Sophie, moving on with a quiet apology to those who had believed in her lies. A week later, Sophie's landlord posted a notice that she had been evicted for non-payment, her things left on the curb, rain-soaking boxes, as she screamed at the sky, demanding someone fix it for her. I heard she moved to Arizona with a new boyfriend, telling him the same stories she always told, that she was the victim, that the world was cruel, that her sister had stolen her life. But there was no one left to believe her for long. I returned to the clinic, unlocking the glass doors, breathing in the clean scent of coffee and the soft hum of the waiting room, filling again with patients who trusted me. Alyssa hugged me that morning, whispering "welcome back," before returning to the front desk, the phone ringing with new appointments. I spent the day doing what I loved, helping people, focusing on the steady hum of the drill, the warm gratitude in my patients' smiles. That evening, as I locked up, my phone buzzed with a message from my dad. "I'm proud of you." I read it twice before replying. "Thank you, Dad." When I arrived home, a small box sat on the porch, the scent of warm pie seeping through the paper. My mother's handwriting was on the note, shaky but familiar. She didn't call, didn't text, just sent the pie. It was enough. That night, Ethan and I sat at the kitchen table, sharing the pie in silence, letting the sweetness settle the last pieces of chaos Sophie had left behind. I thought about karma, how it doesn't always come when we want it, how it waits silent, patient, arriving when there is nowhere left to hide. Sophie had spent her life running, blaming, demanding. And now there was no one left to fix it for her. I leaned back, letting out a breath, feeling the quiet peace I had fought for, earned, and claimed for myself. If you've ever been in a situation like this, share in the comments.